The sound of a new era in transportation and Hampton roads. The tide is rolling today through Norfolk. The 7.4-mile, $318.5 million light rail transportation system could mean some economic changes to the African American community. Census data indicates African Americans make up the majority of bus riders in our area. Will those numbers translate to light rail? Could the additional transportation system offer more access to jobs in low-income areas? What about economic development opportunities surrounding the light rail stops? What light rail means to the African American community with our guests Bob Batcher, Leonard Colvin, and Bruce Williams right after the news from NPR.
Discussing the issues and celebrating the successes of the African American community. This is Another View.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Barbara Hamley. Welcome to Another View. And before we get started on the most exciting thing to happen in the city of Norfolk in a long time, we're talking about light rail, I did want to take a moment to talk about something very special that happened yesterday. I had the pleasure and the honor of serving as the MC for the African American Business of the Year Awards breakfast. It was held over in Hampton at the Convention Center, and each of the 7 major cities in Hampton Roads honored an African-American business within their city limits. And so it was just a wonderful event. There were about 200 people there. Bobby Scott was Congressman Bobby Scott was the keynote speaker. And I just want to give a special shout out to Terebinth Table, A Sweet Retreat in Chesapeake, Eagle Enterprises in Hampton, Smith Brothers Enterprises in Newport News, Corporate Athletic Management in Norfolk, Silver Spoon Bakery in Portsmouth, LW's Lawn Service in Suffolk, and Bullock and Cooper Attorneys at Law in Virginia Beach. Those were the winners of the 2011 African American Business of the Year Awards breakfast. It's the kickoff event for the Black Expo Tour 2011, which is going on in Hampton this weekend. It's an opportunity for minority businesses to come together, show their wares, learn some information about ways to stay in business, and it's an all-around good time for everybody. So, it's been a long time coming, but today is the day. Passengers on board the Tide, Norfolk's light rail system. Despite controversy, cost overruns, changes in management, and all the drama, this morning, starting at 6 a.m., passengers were able to ride the train to their destinations. Today, we'll look at light rail from an African-American perspective. According to the census, African-Americans make up the majority of bus riders. So will those numbers translate to light rail? Will there be more travel opportunities to jobs and school? Or is it a route to nowhere, as some have complained? Are there economic development opportunities near light rail stops for African American businesses? Here to talk about it is Bob Batcher, Public Relations Manager with the City of Norfolk, transportation expert Bruce Williams with A. Bruce Williams and Associates, and Leonard Colvin, journalist with the New Journal and Guide, and a public transportation user. But before we start our conversation, let's hear from some potential riders of light rail.
I'm ready for it. I think it'll be a good place to get you from point A to B on time without worrying about parking.
I think starting downtown is great, but I feel like it could go farther, maybe to a town center in Pembroke or somewhere in Ocean View. Then I would feel more inclined to ride it.
But I think it should go as far as probably a little bit deeper in the beach, past Newtown Road. Maybe go as far as Bird Neck Road, a little bit further for the beach goers.
I'm scared I'm going to get hit by it, I'll be honest. Nervous.
Well, we think that the light rail is a good idea for the city of Norfolk, hoping it will bring revenue into this city, period.
Our Lisa Godley out and about talking to some folks just a couple of days before this morning. But, Bob, how's it been going today?
Wow. This morning, it's been awesome. We started off at 6 a.m., actually about 3 o'clock this morning.
3 o'clock this morning.
Getting ready. But about 5:30, people started really gathering. We had at least 3 full trains, standing room only. A lot of people did the whole route. That's what they wanted to do, and they did the whole route, came back, and they were just smiling like crazy. So, and some of that feedback has been, we've heard, that you just heard. They wanted to go further already. You know, when's the expansion going to be? What I'd like to encourage is for the listener and for anybody who rides the Tide, give us a login at norfolk.gov, and we want to hear your comments. So some of those comments really were constructive. Like one guy had a bike with real fat tires, and it didn't fit in the rack. But because you can take your bike,
you can take a bike actually on the Tide.
So we want to hear those kinds of things, so we can kind of feed that back. I kind of had a sneak peek last night, and kind of got a little disoriented. So we got some comments to make, but we want to hear from people that are riding it because it's been awesome.
Okay, Bruce Williams with Bruce Williams and Associates. You rode today?
Rode this morning.
I see your commemorative ticket here on the counter.
Got my commemorative ticket, had my brochure. Me and my lady friend hopped on this morning and at the Newtown Road Station, which is not too far from my house, and parked there, had parking room, although there was a lot of cars in the parking lot, parked in and ran to Phil Souquette and ran with Bob and hopped on the train, and we rode downtown, air-conditioned comfort, had a seat. Got a chance to see the city from a whole different perspective, and had a chance to talk to a young man who got on at the Chesterfield Heights area. He lives in Chesterfield Heights and got on the Ballantyne station. He was there with his 11-year-old daughter, African American gentleman, and young fella. He has 2 sons as well, one 12 and one 9, and he could see the fact that his daughter could ride to the museum, and he enjoyed the fact now he could ride downtown to his job, and he was very anxious about it and enjoyed the ride. And there was a lot of interaction. Got a chance to talk to people. Riding back, we stopped at the MacArthur station, got off, got a cup of coffee and free donut, and a little entertainment, and some people watching, and then hopped on the train. It was a standing room coming back. Got a chance to talk to a gentleman who was 60 years old, works for Centera, lived out in Chesapeake Square Mall. And so he hopped the ferry, came over, hopped on the train. He said, I'm going to do this. I'm going to try a couple things, but I'm going to try to go to work that way.
Wow. So the ultimate use of public transportation.
Ultimate use, but you got a chance to talk to people. And I think that's one of the elements that's, you can't spend $100 million for, but it's a byproduct that you can't think of very places where people can interact that way instantaneously than light rail. I found that to be true in Charlotte, and now I see it happening here.
It's happening here. Leonard Colvin with the New Journal and Guide, reporter for the New Journal and Guide, and you are an avid public transportation user.
Yes, I am.
Now, have you had a chance to ride light rail yet?
No, but tomorrow I am going to wear it out. I plan on taking it from the hospital and going out to Newtown Station and coming back and stopping at the YMCA on View Street to work out.
When we talked to
show off.
Oh, yeah.
Daggone it.
Well, when we talked a little earlier as we were setting up this show, you did express a little bit of frustration about the route in terms of whether or not you thought it would be advantageous for people, particularly in the lower income areas and so forth, to be able to actually use it so that they can get where they need to go.
Yeah. If you live along the route, and if you work at Centera Hospital or downtown Norfolk or Norfolk State, it's gonna work like gangbusters for you. But if you work in some of the outlying areas, it's gonna be a problem. It might be a problem, depending on the frequency and the efficiency of the connector buses. Mm-hmm. Now, tomorrow I'm going to get on one of those connector buses. I'm going to go the whole 9 yards and see how they work. Sometimes they may get caught up in traffic, and there might be a delay there. There's a lot of kinks in the system right now, but I assume by the end of the year, all of the kinks will be worked out. But a lot of people can utilize the buses to get to work more efficiently than they can the light rail. Mm-hmm. I can't take it to work. I have to. I live near the zoo in Norfolk, so I catch the number 1 bus, go downtown to the transfer station, Cedar Grove, catch the number 20 or the number 9, and it takes me to work maybe 20, 30 minutes. Mm-hmm. There's a station in Ingleside down near where I work, near the police operations center out there. But I don't know how far that station is from Norfolk Square Road. So that's the problem. So I can't use it.
So it'll be a matter of trying to get used to kind of where the lines are and where they intersect and so forth.
They're going to have to tinker with saturating the buses, getting in the areas, the gray areas, what we call, and getting them to those areas where the line doesn't reach and you have to use feeder buses too. It's going to be a lot of tinkering with
Hang
that.
on one second. 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. Give us a call and let us know if you rode the Tide today. Do you plan to ride it? And what your thoughts are about this newest form of transportation in Norfolk. Bob, one of the concerns as light rail was being built and so forth was the whole idea of whether or not people would ride the buses in order to make the connections. Some changes were made?
Yeah, there's one of the things that Philip Schuchat and the new leadership at HRT brought in is a whole efficiency study. And, of course, I think you all even covered that in looking at what are some of the bus lines, recognizing that it's got to be a market-driven thing. It's based on demand. And so there were some efficiencies that could be gained by eliminating some lines that only had one or two people or a handful of people riding it. And then there are other lines that if by increasing frequency, you could actually get better ridership. So he brought that kind of business sense into the mass transit. I think that's paying dividends now. One of the things, Leonard, I want to bring to your attention, a year ago, if you had described your bus route to me, I would have been totally lost. I wouldn't have known what you were talking about. But because it's getting into my conversation, my vernacular, I now understood. I knew exactly what you were talking about. Right. Bus 1, the whole 9 yards. I'll tell you, I get stuck behind bus 1 trying to get to work. And so for me, the other view, sometimes buses got in the way of me getting to work or me doing what I want to do. Now what I'm finding is we're having conversations with people who haven't been on a bus in 6 years. Who are saying, now, how do I buy fare? How do I get a ticket? Do I drop quarters in the box? You remember those days? Yeah. And we're bringing a conversation to a full community now. And so I think what we're going to see with those kind of market-driven strategies, that some of the connector buses might be more frequent. They'll be looking at that. How can we increase ridership? A good example is the Net Connector. Right. The Net Connector actually was a creation of the Net, which was downtown, and that's all it did. Was downtown. For years, people in Ghent have been saying, if it would only come up here, we could do the whole connection up and connect up our entertainment community.
On Saturday, that was a wasted effort because a lot of times you saw that connector going to places where people didn't ride the bus, like sitting in front of the museum. And nobody would get on the bus.
Right.
I would be walking from the YMCA.
The original Net.
Yeah, the original Net. And nobody would be on the bus. And I just walked by it because by the time I got to where I was going,
the bus wouldn't be there.
Exactly.
We're now, come this weekend, the Net Connector will connect up with the Tide at a variety of places. Fort Norfolk, Monticello. It's been merged with the old 310 that went from Cedar Grove, the connector bus that you had to
See, what they're doing now is they're using the connector at Cedar Grove, which goes down 21st Street, which was a brilliant idea. And you go down to Hampton Boulevard, and it comes up to the Fort Norfolk station.
So the whole idea, though, is to try to pull the city together in terms of transportation. 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. Give us a call and let us know your impressions of the Tide light rail. We did hear from HRT. We were hoping to get someone on the phone, but I guess they're a little busy today. But Tom Holden, who is the spokesperson for HRT, says the trains have been running full all day. They don't have specific numbers yet, but they are encouraging riders to get off at MacArthur Square and look around to give others an opportunity to ride as opposed to riding the entire route. But they're really happy about what they're seeing and that there have been no incidents so far. So that's a really good thing.
Barbara, if I could tell you, we've got some brochures, and I would encourage people, again, to go to norfolk.gov and see, because there is all kinds of awesome stuff taking place at a variety of the stations, and it was just solely for that purpose, is to get people off the train to make room.
One of the things that happens when you got a system, we're talking transportation system, not just like rail. Exactly. It's a starter line. Because it's an infrastructure, you now have stuff jumping off from the infrastructure, the bus system being arranged. Now, where the real concern has to be from the African-American perspective has to be with the different sites where the stations are and what the development of economic development is going to look like. The pilot ran an article just last week on the Charlotte and what has affected Charlotte. Property values have gone up. If you lived in Stonebridge, your house is worth more now than it was before because now you can walk to the station and get there. But the other side of this coin, from an African American perspective, certain stations like around Norfolk State University, Ballantyne, and other places need to be those businesses around it need to be actively seeking to tie in to increase the wealth of that community by way of acquiring land, of getting businesses, of tying those businesses into the transportation system. I noticed, for example, all of the discounts and whatnot, but I didn't see anything from Spartan Square, Spartan Station, where those shops are. That's a crucial element. I know that as we talk about the system expanding, Sundays, for example, is going to be one of those areas where hopefully people start using it. Maybe we'll want to use it to go to church. They'll expand the hours. But the point is, from the African American's perspective, it's got to be looked at from all sides. For example, if those feeder bus lines, if the stop in front of a feeder bus line is going to be frequent, is that a place for me to have my business? What kind of business would feed the needs of the people traveling? I think it's important to understand. A lot of people ask, well, were African-American firms used when they built this thing? Yes, we got figures on that. As a member of COMTO, we went to a FOA request to see that money was spent with African-American firms.
And explain COMTO.
COMTO was the Council of Minority Transportation Officials. But now that the system is running, folk have to think in terms of the economic value. One of the things I'm very happy about is the fact that this was within the stone's throw of Dr. Newby's building at Fort Norfolk. That's his building, and right there's where that stop is. But we've got to see more development like that. And we've got to press the city to make sure that there's economic involvement in that.
So if there is an African-American business that wants to look into being around, and I'll ask both you, Bruce, and you, Bob, wants to look into building around a light rail stop or so forth, what are some of the things they need to consider, Bruce?
Well, they need to consider, first of all, know something about transportation-oriented development, TODs. Where they're tying their business model to the ebb and flow of traffic that comes through that station, that they're talked to HRT, that they've talked to the city, that they've even asked the city, who's out there looking like me that's involved in this, and leverage that to be involved with development. I see the Brambleton area where Norfolk State Station is a real possibility for that kind of development.
Yeah, Bruce, but for years you got
this is Leonard Colvin talking.
You got 4 buses running around Norfolk. 4 buses, Norfolk. Even before the tie state, you had 4 buses running around that area, and Norfolk State has done a wonderful job of developing in itself, getting ready for development around there. But if you couldn't do it with the buses, what makes you think that light rail is going to be able to do it? There has to be some incentive. There has to be programs, development ideas that will allow Norfolk State to take advantage of not only light rail that's passing through, but the bus system that's been there for years.
Well, let me use an example. UCLA, for example, has a light rail system in Los Angeles. And UCLA has a stop where the UCLA station is. The key with light rail versus buses is that, as we already know, light rail runs on every 15 minutes, every 10 minutes. It's guaranteed it's going to run.
Right.
The other thing is people have the opportunity to get off and get back on again because they have a 15-minute lead time. St. Louis, for example, what they did there was they have this thing called Grand Central Station, which is away from downtown. Well, during 12 o'clock noon, it's free to ride back and forth between those two. So unlike the bus system where you might have people coming and going but not have a sense of destination. Norfolk State is a destination. It's the Norfolk State Station. You can build around that destination and get people to stop. Wilder Center's there. Well, then what kind of business would feed people coming to Wilder Center that didn't want to take the car but would ride the train to get there because of its frequency? The key behind light rail is that frequency, and it's like a spine of a body. You got the spine, and then the bus lines feed to that spine. If that effectively works, the system will work, and those points of embarkation and debarkation will be sites for economic development. But African Americans got to have ownership and participation in those sites.
Bob, are there special programs? Are there opportunities for the city that the city is looking at in terms of making sure that it is inclusive in terms of bringing those businesses?
Yeah, in fact, one of the things, and it goes beyond just the transportation, but one of the things that we're engaged in now is setting the priorities for the city council, setting the priorities for the next 10 years for the city of Norfolk. And one of the top leaders, of course, is workforce development. Is to really go after, our unemployment rate and getting Norfolk residents employed at Norfolk businesses. And the other one, of course, is not just transportation, but mobility and accessibility. It kind of goes into what Bruce was talking about, is that when we talk transportation, quite often we're thinking more highways, more whatever, but it's really getting people moving from point A to point B. When I was at Norfolk State a couple of weeks ago, we were doing a community engagement meeting with Norfolk State and the surrounding areas to talk about light rail coming. And there was a series of those kind of conversations we've been having for the last couple of months. And I've always started those off with the group. We've had an average of about 70 or 80 people there. How many of you have ridden a bus in the last six years? Maybe one or two in the first groups. When we got to Norfolk State, there were probably one or two who had not ridden the bus. And it was remarkable the difference in conversation, because they were looking at just what you were saying, that reliability, that continuity. They were asking about the connectivity, from Greenbrier, from outer areas. How can I get from bus 20, route 20 into the bus? I'm looking for that connectivity. The other thing that I was hearing though loud and clear, and we've seen it in Roslyn, up in Northern Virginia and Maryland, places that are starting to rely on rail more so than car, you start seeing that movement back into the central core. So what probably will be happening is you'll start seeing a residential move. We've seen that already with the Belmont, the Green and Ghent. A lot of these apartment buildings have been built. They made people are saying, wait a minute, the housing market's collapsing. Why is Norfolk building all these apartments? Well, where are they being built? They're being built along the line in accessibility. So you'll start seeing people moving in, so there's more connectivity. Because what they're starting to say is, I don't need two cars in my family of two. Maybe I only need one.
Well, look at it from this perspective. You live in Lake Edward, Virginia Beach right now, and you wanted to go to TCC. You can now get to TCC without a car. Now, from an African-American's perspective, economically speaking, if I don't own a car, how do I get one? I got insurance, gasoline at $3.50. But now you have access to that. A student in Norfolk State now can look for a job in that Greenwich Road area and get there, as opposed to that damning 2.5 hours.
And because of the wisdom of Norfolk State leadership, they've signed into the Go Pass 365, and students and faculty and staff of Norfolk State, as well as ODU, can ride free.
Let's hear from our audience. Carol, calling us from Norfolk. Thanks for joining us, Carol.
Hi. I have a question and a comment. My comment is that my dad is 88 years old, and he lives in Dent Square. He would love to be able to get to 21st Street. He doesn't drive, but in order to take the new Route 17, he has to walk over to Monticello Avenue, and that's not very practical. He's not the only elderly person living in that area, and I think that that's something that HRT needs to look at. My second is a question. Why is the information on fares so vague on the website? It doesn't tell you anything about transfers or any. It doesn't give enough specific information.
Okay. Well, one of the reasons for that is because they've really simplified the fare thing. There are no more transfers. You're the bus rider. You tell us.
If you got $3.50, they'll give you a pass to ride all day. I have a $50 pass that I could ride for 30 days, and there's no additional fare unless I'm going over to Hampton, the 961. There's an extra $1.50. But and I think if you have that fare cutter card, that 30-day fare cutter card, you can also ride the tie and the bus.
Yes,
it's transferable.
Ride everything.
It's
everything.
Seamless, yeah.
What you buy, is ride everything.
Yeah.
Now you've got a few more years before this happens, but for your dad, Carol, he actually can get a discount rate because he's over 60 years old.
Right.
Leonard's nowhere close to that.
Carol, I hope that helps you out. Thank you for calling. We appreciate it. 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. We're talking about light rail and its impact on the African-American community. And my guests are Bob Batcher, who is Public Relations Manager with the City of Norfolk, transportation expert Bruce Williams with A. Bruce Williams and Associates, and Leonard Colvin, journalist with the New Journal and Guide and a public transportation user. I want to ask a question, and I know I'm going to catch a lot of grief for this, but I'm going to ask it anyway. There were a lot of
You're looking toward me.
But in the beginning, when light rail was really coming together, and there were a lot of public comments and people were talking about it, and HRT and others made it very clear that they needed white men in suits, quite honestly, to ride the train in order for it to be successful. Now, people, I think what was meant by that was we need everybody to ride it in order for it to make sense. But it didn't translate that way sometimes in the African American community. And Bob, when you said, I was at Norfolk State and most of the people had ridden the bus, had ridden public transportation as opposed to other areas. Is this something that is going to ultimately bring us together for change as opposed to the disparity? Leonard, you shaking your head, so I'm going to start with you.
A couple of years ago, HRT was doing some promotionals and showing people getting on and off the bus and everything, and all of them white people wearing suits and everything. And I was just falling over laughing. And my experience with the bus is that 85-90% of the bus riders are African American. Most of them are poor, most of them. And there are a good number of people who, if they could afford a car, wouldn't be on the bus. People ride the bus not because they care about conservation of energy or their carbon footprint. They can't afford it. And if they could afford a car, probably the buses would be empty. Mm-hmm. But I think that a lot of people should understand that it's riding a bus is economically driven. It's sometimes a very practical way of getting to work or wherever you have to go. And it takes a lot of cars off the streets a lot of times. But if people could afford to drive cars, they wouldn't be on the bus. That's
for the fact that I worked on the Yes campaign when we had that 1%,
right,
in which that had the opportunity to fund some $9 billion worth of road construction, transit, and everything else, and it was voted down. A lot of senior citizens voted it down. I remember going out there near Robert Hall and talking to people. Well, we don't see the problem. We don't see the need. Now 3 o'clock, see a senior try to drive around here. 4:30, can't get around. The deal is when you talk about economic system, a transportation system like they have in Hong Kong, for example, where the ferry ties to the train, ties to the subway, ties to the bus, you're going to see the situation happen here. That race has always been used as a deterrent for advancement in technology and in infrastructure, particularly when it had impact on the African American community. Virginia Beach, when they had the opportunity to vote this a referendum, one of the reasons why it failed, and by the way, only 43% voted for it.
All right.
But the reason why it was voted down was 2 reasons. One, people were lied to, saying it was going to make your taxes go up. Those tax dollars that were being used, 80% of it from the federal government, were going to be used somewhere else. Dallas, Los Angeles, Baltimore, Seattle, Phoenix. That's where the money went. It wasn't coming back. Second piece was that an element's going to be brought to the beach. That element was translated to be black.
Yep.
As if criminals, regardless what color, don't drive. The fact of the matter remains, those 2 fears were put into people's minds to vote against the infrastructure. But when you look at Charlotte, which I rode on, you've got people in furs, in suits, white, black, purple, riding the train because it creates option. And when you got gas at $3.50 a piece, when you got traffic jams where, like, for example, the other day, you couldn't get down 264 because you had a traffic jam at Witch Duck Road. And if you got that as an option versus riding the train, getting home in 20 minutes, there lies the difference. What happens there, race has nothing to do with it, and a car has nothing to do with it, particularly when you got traffic jams and you got gas at $4 a gallon, or you've got tolls. This is an option. Everybody's not going to take the option. But if 10% come off there, that helps me if I'm driving or riding.
Bob?
I had a college professor way back when who said every decision in life was economic, and I didn't agree with him until I start making decisions as an adult now. And they are economic. And they are, I think the bus system, traditional transit systems are geared toward people who have no choice. Your point about the car. What the train does is it raises the bar. And that in order to get people on the train, they now have to communicate and connect with people who do have choices. Do I leave my car at home or do I take the bus? And I think with $4 a gallon gas, and it's more than just gas money, it's the congestion and that kind of thing. But I want to go back to Carol's dad. Carol's dad, because of living older, has choices, but one of his choices is he can't get to places like he used to, MacArthur Center Mall. Let's use that as an example. Well, he starts seeing that, okay, I'm a block away from an opportunity, then I'll pay that cost. Okay, for $25 or $30 a month, I forgot what a senior pass is, I can get access now and go to the mall. Or I can get access now and go to Newtown Road. And if it then what happens? So that's the train. Well, but if I use that same ticket to take the net connector, I now can get to the marketplace on 21st. And guess what? I'm going to get on a bus for the first time ever. Mm-hmm. And so by looking at it not necessarily in a racial situation, but looking at people who have places to go and as a connectivity, I think we'll win.
Bruce?
Yeah, 1 out of every 5 senior citizens don't have a car, and many senior citizens are afraid of driving after dark.
Exactly.
Now, when we get the time change and it gets dark at 5 o'clock, and that person wants to go downtown, wants to go to church or something like that, they have an option.
Mm-hmm.
They can drive a shorter distance, and ride the train, or maybe pool up together with another senior and ride the train and not have to worry about driving in the dark. And I've had a lot of seniors tell me that. I've talked to a lot of seniors. I did the Joy Club out there, one of the churches out in Virginia Beach, and they were very excited about it. They were concerned about safety. And if you notice today, we had safety. We had security all over the place, and their off-duty policemen are going to be working in uniform, and they're going to have their own security thing. Once you realize it's safe,
and I have to admit, I freely admit, I am a car driver. I mean, I have never ridden public transportation since I've been in Hampton Roads. I did in Baltimore because that's the way we got around.
We got to work on that.
No, exactly. But as I'm listening to you all's conversation, I still hear drive to the park and ride, get on the train. What I'm concerned about is there a group of people who still will be relegated, if you will, to the bus? And so, therefore, will that service continue to be as strong as the train?
The bus does not, the train does not go into, as I said, these gray areas. There are a lot of gray areas.
Right. Now, we know this is a starting line.
Yeah,
too.
it's only 7 miles, and it only goes a certain direction.
And we're being fair.
It has to, even with the feeder buses, the guy, the old man in Get Square, he is closer than he thinks. All he has to do is walk over to 21st Street. He can get, it's a learned culture riding a bus. Trust me.
In a story, and this is a confession on my part. Since I bought a house and did what I was told to do, I lost my pool. So I bum a pool from some friends. But they're there. They're home over at Pembroke Tower. And I'm going to tell the story of these people because they're great people. Last summer, though, it comes to the price, because last summer I had to spend my entire time at the pool explaining to the residents, defending light rail construction. And they were all over me. It was over budget, it's this, and whatever. This summer, different story. They're all gathering around. Once we announced the opening, they couldn't wait till today. See, I'm talking about them because I know they're on the bus and not because they were trying to figure out how do we get over to Fort Norfolk, and we're going to do a party. Mm-hmm. And so then I was able to tell them about Net Connector, because a couple of them are in wheelchairs, walkers, whatever. It's wheelchair accessible. It's walker accessible, bike accessible. Mm-hmm. So they're going to catch the Net Connector over there by the hospital, right across the street from Pembroke Tower, take it 1 block, but that's important to them, and get on the Tide and ride it. These people have not been on a bus
ever. See, so it'll be a new experience. That's great. Ralph, thank you for holding so long. How are you?
Yes, I'm here.
Go ahead. You're on the air.
I'm in the Hampton area and will not have much opportunity to avail myself to this rapid transit. But I'm still concerned about how will they assure that the integrity of it is maintained. Speaking from the standpoint of human behavior, we don't need a system where people are going to be bringing the buckets of chicken on, the Subway sandwiches on, playing the radio above normally. Those issues, people just in some of their behaviors are just not conducive to being in a common area with other people. How are they going to control that?
Okay, let's let our panelists talk. Let's get to Bruce first, and then I'll get you, Leonard. Go ahead, Bruce.
It's a good question, Ralph. And if you look, I don't know if you probably get it on that side of the water, but in the Virginia pilot on Wednesday, they had awards of rules of the rails. And first of all, there's no food, no dogs, no alcoholic beverages, no beverages at all, and no smoking on the train. And there are some pretty hefty fines that go with that to police it. They spent $200,000 guarding those trains so nobody could write stuff on them. And you got to believe the pride of Norfolk, and I think Bob will speak to this, they intend to make this system clean, efficient, effective, and safe. And what I saw today, given the kind of attention I saw today, and also what's riding on it, they're going to see to it that something happens that changes behavior. And, yeah, it ain't going to be easy, like folks running into the trains or crashing into them, but it's going to mean a change in behavior for some folks.
Leonard?
I think one of the biggest misconceptions, fears that people generate about public transportation or downtown Norfolk or whatever is that it's ghetto. And ghetto refers to black, poor, and dangerous. Okay. And you get a lot of black people who say, well, I will never ride the bus because I don't want to be on there with all those people. Okay. I think we have to overcome those misconceptions. Yeah, those stereotypes. I mean, that is a public piece of transportation, right. And it's going to be dirty. There's going to be, I'm pretty sure they won't allow food on there, but people are going to leave garbage or whatever. It will not be a seamless, clean, sanitized situation 100%. And this is an urban area. And if it was totally white or totally black, you would find people who are afraid of getting on there because somebody will be playing music too loud, which is not going to happen. They'll even loud on the buses, right. Or they're going to be rowdy people.
But I think, Leonard, to your point, that makes a good point that people have a misconception, Bob, about riding buses, thinking this same thing is going to transfer to the train when they've never ridden the bus. You said you can't play music on the bus.
Well, first thing I got to address the bucket of chicken because I'm hungry, and you can't. We got some great chicken places in Norfolk, and as long as you keep the container closed, don't eat it on the bus. You can bring it with you. And you're right. You know, there was a poll done that Old Dominion did about mass transit, and all these people said, "Oh yeah, I'll ride the bus. I think it's great." And I said, well, how many people actually have ridden the bus that had all these great perceptions of these different? 98 did not ride the bus. And so I think a lot of people form their opinions by looking into by the way, the lit windows at night. Right. So it's a safe environment. Mm-hmm. One of the things that's going to be put in place, and thanks for your recognition, Bruce, of Norfolk really caring, because we do have some, as our new city manager said, skin in the game. Yep. We've got some skin in the game, and one of the things that we've been really concerned about is will the maintenance contracts meet the expectations of our leadership, who are saying we want to raise the bar. If you'll notice, the bus if FTA had their way, the bus stops or the stations would have been like shelters. They're really nice. They're really upgraded. I mean, they were supposed to be an expectation of I'm at some place that cares, that matters. There's public art there. So that extra step was made. We're not going to let it get trashed up. And there is concern about in designing the memos of understanding with HRT, not to say, okay, trash cans will be emptied, twice a week, but trash cans will be emptied when they're full. And then one of the things, and the key difference, when that driver on the bus is driving the bus, they're driving the bus. When the operator of the light rail is operating the light rail, they're operating the light rail. But at the end of each line, which is 24 minutes, guess what they have to do? They get out of her, they walk to the other end. While they're walking to the other end, they're checking the seats. They've got a bag with them to pick up any kind. Don't leave the litter behind, but just in case somebody accidentally does, then they're going to be cleaning that up. So there's going to be every 24 minutes there will be a review of that car to make sure that it's maintained.
Let me ask you. Go ahead, Bruce.
Yeah, I want to say to Ralph, come down to Norfolk and ride it. And because we need you to ride it so we can bring it to Hampton, because it's going to take some political will for us, the system, to grow to the point where my grandchildren will be able to ride out to the beach, ride to the Hampton by way of rail. I see the day, I vision it, that a kid from Norfolk State or from Brambleton or from Middle Arch can work at Busch Gardens and don't need a car.
And before we lose Leonard on this one, because he's about ready to crack up on us, I want to say if your perception's met or you're not happy, let us know.
Let me ask this question. Have bus stops been upgraded so that, in terms of shelter and seating and so forth, as not like the light rail stops, but in other words, has that triggered someone saying maybe we need to take a look at this also?
As you know, there's totally new senior management over at HRT, and there's been contracts put out to improve. I think it's like, and the number is astronomical. It's like 300 and some bus shelters that will be redone over the next several months. The iPad or I don't want to have a phone smarter than me, so I don't know. But the smartphones, they're buying some technology so that you can do your thing toward the sign. It'll tell you when the bus is going to be coming. So that kind of thing is going to be entered in over the next 6 to 9 months.
With the right kind of.
Hang on one second, Bruce.
But Leonard's losing it
over here, and I want to hear from him. What do you think?
I can tell these two guys
guys have not ridden the bus in a while. Okay, now you talk about the shelters.
I did in New York City. Does that count?
I did too.
Okay. You talk about the shelters for the tide. They're nice. And they're cool and everything. But in the wintertime,
it's going to be cold.
It's going to be cold. And a lot of times you can't stand in those shelters in the summertime because the heat is convective in there and it's terrible. A lot of work has to be done on the shelters, particularly my favorite route, Grammy Route, because there's only, I think there's maybe about 3 shelters on the whole route. That's one of the longest routes in the city. But they have done a better job of cleaning up around the shelters. And if you're saying they're building new shelters, more power to them, because that's much needed, because last Saturday the rainstorm that came through ruined my telephone.
Uh-oh.
Well, one of the things
so you don't have that iPhone anymore.
No, I don't have it.
One of the things I see happening is because of light rail, because now the attention on mass transit in the region, and that attention is coming from a lot of different places. Future Hampton Roads, 200-plus men, the Hampton Roads Transportation Alliance, because folks want to see this system expanded. It's going to raise the bar for HRT. They get a new headquarters. They got a new bus barn. But what's going to happen is, like in New York, I used to live in Queens, southeast Queens, when I was a kid. When I went to college, I had to ride the 3A bus. They don't call it the Q3. Used to call it the Q bus. Okay. But they say, how you travel? I travel the Q shoe or the Q3A. That bus went from southeast Queens out there near the Nassau border to the F train stop at the railhead. That's how we got downtown Manhattan to go to school. I went to Baruch College, the University of New York. My sister went to Fordham. 3 buses and a train. No, 3 trains and a bus. But what will happen here, if we do it right, and that's key, we got to do it right, the bus system will change and upgrade, because it will now be a feeder to the light rail, and that will change the ridership. It'll change the service. But if it doesn't, the service doesn't feed the need of the people, we'll ghettoize the system.
Well, and I think one of the first things that Tommy Smeagol raised to our attention in one of his first council meetings was the condition of the bus shelters in Ocean View. So as long as it becomes part of the conversation, we had a community engagement meeting, a community conversation a few weeks ago, and about 70 or 80 people there, across the board people. And I was amazed on how much mass transit and buses were talked about. So I think it's raising the bar and getting this conversation going. And again, going back to what we said 45 minutes ago, not necessarily on race, but based on it's providing a new opportunity for access and connectivity.
I want to ask a question because we only have about 5 minutes left.
You're the one that invited the 3 of us.
I know, really, in this conversation. I love this, though. It's my fault. But here's a question. Growing up in Baltimore, I lived in West Baltimore, Northwest Baltimore. There were people who lived in West Baltimore who had never been to East Baltimore, and vice versa. There are people in Norfolk, in certain communities, who have never been to another side of this city. Do you think that light rail will be an opportunity for expansion of the mind, expansion of experiences, particularly for people who feel like they're pretty stuck in their own communities?
I think this morning proved to me that this weekend, Smart Move is giving them free rides. Is because I think a lot of folks are going to see their city in a different way, or see the region a different way. I heard people say, why can't we get this to the beach? People who had never even ridden anything the HRT had were showing up at the station today. And I think that exposure and the exposure to other people. Now, some folks have a real problem with crowds, but other folks look for the opportunity to integrate. We are still a southern city to some extent, and there's a certain southern gentility involved. Also, like I said, this is one place where you're going to run into a whole different bunch of folks. That may scare some folk, but on the other hand, the gentleman that I spoke to this morning offered up the conversation to me, because we were standing next together holding the same rail. And because it was crowded, we had to hold the same rail. But I think that's going to have some impact. Now, where it goes from there, I don't know. But I think the opportunity is there.
Leonard?
You're a good PR person, Bruce. I must give it to you. But, yeah, I think that the light rail has an opportunity to allow people to see parts of Norfolk they have not seen. And people who live in people who live in Portsmouth to come to Norfolk and see parts of Norfolk they haven't seen. Because if you go down on the 21st Street corridor, there's some people in Virginia Beach who have never been down there and don't know that all the goodies that exist in the city of Norfolk. So it has an opportunity for not only for racial communication and dialogue.
Can I ask one question?
Yeah.
One plea? based on this. When I said this at Norfolk State, that the bus rider is becoming the new norm on mass transit and on moving around. We need your help. When you got that person that looks lost, do like the New Yorker does. I don't care what you. I will say in front of Bruce. We all have this understanding and perception of New Yorkers, but you put them on their mass transit that they really love, and you look like you're lost. They'll help you. Mm-hmm. So for those of you that have been riding the buses for years, please help us newbies along and show us what to do. I'm
going to try to get one quick phone call in here. Mike joins us from Virginia Beach. Hi, Mike.
Hi, how you guys doing?
Hi, real quick because we only have a little bit of time.
I'm going to be real excited when this thing connects to the passenger rail service at Harbor Park, which will take us to Richmond and D.C. and New York and Boston. I mean, that's only a year and a half, 2 years away, and it puts us in the forefront. So it's an incredible launch of Tide, and it'll get better when it connects to the Amtrak service.
Okay, Mike, thanks for the call. You want to respond to that?
Oh, that's awesome, because that's exactly what this is doing. It's raising the bar. The visionaries from the mid-1990s that said, daggone it, we don't care what the cynics say, we're going to bring light rail to Norfolk. It is because of that. It's a whole new way of looking at things. You know what's really going to be cool? In a year and a half, you'll be able to leave Broad Creek, take your bike down to the Ballantyne Station, get on it, go to Harbor Park, get on the train, and next thing you know, you'll be home visiting your mom in New York.
Right.
Wow.
By the way, if we're ever going to see high-speed rail here, we have to show a visionary for mass transit. You'll never see high-speed rail come here, and we're going to have to fight to get there here because we're behind the schedule. But if we're ever going to have high-speed rail, we got to be able to be mass transit-oriented.
Leonard, we got 1 minute left. I'm going to let you have the last word.
Oh, wow. But it's good. I'm glad that the Tide is finally here. And I think that at the unveiling yesterday, there was a lot of goodwill. A lot of people have a lot of good feeling about what's happening. And I hope that it does bring some economic opportunities for the African-American community, especially around Norfolk State.
Okay. And with that, gentlemen, we are out of time. Thank you so much, Bob Batcher, Public Relations Manager with the City of Norfolk, Transportation Expert Bruce Williams with A. Bruce Williams and Associates, and Leonard Colvin, journalist with the New Journal and Guide and Public Transportation User. Thank you, gentlemen, so much for being with me today.
Thank you, Barbara.
And we'll be right back. And welcome back. Each year, thousands tour Norfolk Botanical Garden, admiring its beautiful flowers and magnificent trees. But most people are unaware of the history behind the garden's creation. Lisa Godley looks at the significant role that African Americans played in creating this natural beauty.
Beautiful azaleas planted over 70 years ago are still blooming at Norfolk Botanical Garden. They line pathways to help make the garden's 155 acres a Virginia historic landmark. But not far from the entrance, nestled in the garden's historic section, is a bronze statue of an African-American woman holding a shovel, symbolizing how Norfolk Botanical Garden came to be. It was during the Great Depression that the Works Progress Administration, also known as the WPA, hired 200 African-American women and 20 African-American men to create Norfolk Botanical Garden. Mary Elizabeth Ferguson is the last known survivor of the WPA workers. She was 19 years old when she came here, the youngest of the group.
Some called me feisty. I was feisty then because I was small. And I think I weighed about 105. I was very small.
She stares at the statue of the young woman, with her foot propped on the shovel, her dress sweeping several inches past her knee, prompting me to ask Mrs. Ferguson what she wore the year she worked out here.
I was dressed in a dress. I didn't wear no pants. I didn't wear them out here. My husband didn't like ladies in pants, and I didn't wear them.
She describes her shoes as regular, but comfortable.
I don't know what they call them now, but then they called them Oxfords. And I did wear them. I loved to wear them. They felt good on my feet.
The work was intense, using pickaxes, shovels, and hoes to first clear the grounds and later plant the trees, bushes, and flowers that helped to make the garden the attraction that it is today. The weather was not always favorable for such labor-intensive work. Mary Ferguson says temperatures seemed to go from one extreme to the other.
Cold days, and when it was hot, it was hot. And I tried to stay away from out here when it was hot, because I knew that's where the snakes would get around.
Mary Elizabeth Ferguson loves the flowers and has planted many a flower at her own home. But she gets tickled when I ask her about the trees that surround us.
I don't like trees. I don't know, it seems like it's something going to come through there, and I won't see it.
The lone survivor of the WPA workers describes her time here as bittersweet. She says she did not like having to be away from her children, and most certainly did not like the snakes or the trees. But as she slowly surveyed the beautiful grounds around us, she summed it all up this way.
As the day went along and all, that I began to feel good that I had did something for my country.
For Another View, I'm Lisa Godley.
What a wonderful story. Before we leave you today, let me tell you about a very special event happening in Hampton tomorrow. It's the African Landing Commemoration Day, a celebration of the first 20 or so Africans to arrive at Point Comfort, now Fort Monroe, on August 20th, 1619. There are a variety of events planned. Call 757-380-1319 for more information. For other events around town, be sure to check out our website, anotherviewradio.org. And while you're there, sign up for our e-newsletter, a once-a-week reminder of upcoming shows. And friend us on Facebook. Next week, History in the Making, as the nation celebrates the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King with the unveiling of his statue in Washington, D.C. We're going to take you there, and we'll see you next Friday for Another View.